John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins are some of the greatest saxophone heroes ever. But we also know that there might have been a completely crazy competitive battle about who is the best of the two, between the two guys. But this rivalry probably also resulted in the best players ever. So everything they knew, they put it into their music and developed these crazy styles they have. And this is what we can learn so much from. When listening to both their playing, the difference is super clear. So right away let's dig into what we can learn from these two giants of jazz. The first thing I notice when I'm listening to Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane next to each other is the extreme articulation of Sonny Rollins. Listening to John Coltrane, he has a much more legato sound, like everything is slurred. I really believe that you should master both phrasing techniques. So I've made this line up trying to imitate a Coltrane line. Using Coltrane's phrasing, I try to play it as legato as possible and still using jazz phrasing. And when I'm imitating Sonny Rollins' style, it's much more articulated in this line. So when copying Sonny Rollins, which I really advise you to do an exaggerated articulation and phrasing. Before we're going any further, I just want to say that all exercises and all licks are in an extended version in the lesson manual on Patreon. So you do not need to transcribe all this. The download link is in the description. So let's dig into why Coltrane's lines are much more legato than those of Sonny Rollins. Doing a bit of analysis on Coltrane lines, his lines are much more scale based. He used many more scales, just going up the scale and down the scale, which makes his lines actually simpler. When you're playing scales, it's much easier to play fast and going straight into your target notes. And when you're playing fast, it's more difficult to articulate more aggressively like Sonny Rollins. What I just mentioned, that Coltrane is using a lot of scales running directly into the target notes. So the foundation of Coltrane's playing is actually playing the scales directly into the target note using a little bit of arpeggios. So find the easiest way, aim for the target note and just add the scale. Often you would hear Coltrane make a little diatonic enclosure. He's not using a lot of chromatic enclosures, but these small diatonic enclosures makes a nice little edge to his lines. Often Coltrane uses these enclosures in the middle or in the beginning of a line to change direction of the line. And about changing the direction, Coltrane often makes this turn to change the direction. But he will still stick to just the scale, all diatonic notes moving directly into that target note. So you can train this by making small licks going directly into the target note, only using the scale. Add the diatonic enclosures and the turns into these lines. Because of this, using the scales, Coltrane's sound could often be very harmonically difficult to listen to, using very advanced harmonic functions. But again, just using the scales up and down and making this simple makes it again very easy to listen to. So using Coltrane's scale type approach, there's a few techniques you can really get a lot out of if you train these. Try training the turn in the scale like this. And then I made this etude-like enclosure exercise to train the enclosure. And this almost sounds like a classical etude, which I also believe Coltrane was very much into, playing all these classical notes. Train the direct approach into the target note. Again, I made this classical etude and they are all in the lesson manual on Patreon. And please do not get frustrated about the speed of this lesson and the speed wherein I play the exercises. All the exercises and all the licks are in a super extended version in the lesson manual on Patreon, and the download link is in the description. Sonny Rollins was spelling out the chords much more than John Coltrane. He did this by playing, of course, the chord tones a lot. But when you listen to Sonny Rollins, it really does not sound like he's playing the chord tones a lot, because he was super sophisticated in how he was playing the chord tones. And he used a lot of small upper structure arpeggios, we'll get into that in just a bit, but also made his lines very interesting by using these chromatic enclosures and diatonic enclosures. For me, creating a Sonny Rollins sounding line takes much more effort than the easier Coltrane lines. Because in the Sonny Rollins lines there are many more parameters that I need to keep within. And here I'm thinking it's much more a technical level I need to get into to make these lines. Sonny Rollins is using all of these great sounding upper structure arpeggios, mostly triads. So he's not using the big arpeggios like 4 or 5 note arpeggios. You see an A minor triad, you see a B diminished triad, you see an A flat diminished triad, and you see this G augmented triad. And these small triads all account for a chord, the D minor chord, the G7 chord, the G7 flat 9 chord, and the G7 augmented chord. And one of the specialties Sonny Rollins also master is never play the root. He is almost never hitting the root as a root function. And this is one of the things that makes Sonny Rollins line very light to listen to, very easy to listen to. Although he's hitting all the chord notes all the time. He makes it sound fun and play-like. Here I'm making a little upper structure triad exercise, playing the upper structure triads of these D minor playing the F triad. One thing that goes into playing like Sonny Rollins is knowing what chords you're playing, but using these upper structure triads, so knowing what they stand for. What I also mentioned in Sonny Rollins playings are the diatonic and chromatic enclosures. You must know your diatonic and chromatic enclosures to all the notes. And I really like this enclosure exercise. It's kind of fun and difficult. This exercise trains the enclosure and it trains the triads, and it kind of has a melodic line to it too. And again, you do not need to transcribe all the lines from this video. Everything is on my Patreon, all the exercises in all keys wrote out much more elaborate than you see here. The download link is in the description. If you imitate Sonny Rollins and you do not have these nice little trills into your fingers, you miss the sound totally. In this exercise I combine the trills with the triad. I would always try to add the exercise into some more context to get a melodic feel to it. And this melodic line also gives you a feel of how and where to use the line. Many artists copied Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane, and some of the most successful artists in doing this is Michael Brecker and Chris Potter, I think. Try listen to Sonny Rollins and try listen to Chris Potter, try listen to John Coltrane, try listen to Michael Brecker or vice versa. Immediately you will hear, oh, this is Sonny Rollins, this is John Coltrane in the lines of Michael Brecker and Chris Potter. Remember to get all the extended exercise and licks in all 12 keys on the Patreon. The link is in the description. So it's all about practicing, it's about practicing the right way, and these three amazing giants of jazz, Coltrane, Brecker and Potter, did it the right way. Check out this video, how they play so musically. Play music, have fun.